All right, Dave, it looks like it's showtime, and I'm back with you for a guest appearance. And welcome to the show today.
Sierra, I'm glad to be here. I feel like I'm with Jimmy Buffett. That I got you're going to be playing some music in the background. You're all dressed up like you're enjoying Hawaii or something.
Yeah, if I had my son's ukulele, I could break it out for you, but I don't even know how to play it. And it's just past 6 a.m. here, so I'm going to show you we're actually getting the sunrise coming up here. So I don't know if you can see, but that's kind of where I'm at today.
Very cool. Looks like you got a little river running through there. You're in a good spot.
Yeah, it's Airbnb. We can thank them for this one. This is sponsored by that today.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad you're having a good time. Everything going okay? You guys being able to enjoy your trip?
Yeah, the kids are loving it. They really like everything. We went to Maui first, and now we're in Oahu checking everything out, and they just love the island culture. It's kind of like something I think you experienced in Puerto Rico.
I did for 4.5 years, and do love the island life. I enjoy especially the winters. Those nice warm winter mornings are very nice in the island.
It definitely is different, though, coming from Maui to Oahu, because Maui was so laid back and very small, and Oahu feels like L.A. It's a lot of people just right directly in one area. So it's been definitely a different experience.
Yeah, I've never been to Oahu. I've been to Maui, and I've been to the Big Island, which was one of my favorites just because it reminded me a little bit of southern Utah, but also you had a lot of small fishing villages we drove to and drove around to. But yeah, all the islands there, I'm sure, are just great experience to get away and get out of probably snow or something that'd be going on in Utah right now.
Yeah. Well, Dave, I hope my internet stays good because I'm on the balcony here. I went to several locations to make sure I had a good spot, but I'm kind of stuck on the balcony now. So I hope everything goes well for our show today. And I'd like to welcome all of those guests that are with us, joining us live or on replay. Thank you for being with us and enjoying this time. And Dave, I want to talk about something special because you had a really cool webinar that came up just recently that was a brand new show that you do. So besides all of the Facebook Live and YouTube and LinkedIn, you also do a show, or you also do webinars. And this one was actually with Tom Hagna. And
yeah,
it was...
Yep, Retirement Alpha. Sorry, going to jump in there a little bit, but Retirement Alpha talking about how we can use annuities effectively in our retirement, and it was a great show. One of the things I love about Tom is his knowledge. You've got an expert there that spent decades educating himself on retirement products, retirement processes, all the things that need to be done, and it was a pretty great show as far as being able to spend that time and listen to the concepts that he shares.
So that's what I wanted to do today, Dave, because, we talk about and ask you questions. So one of the ones I wanted to do today was go through and ask you questions from this webinar. And while we're doing that, I invite those who are watching live to jump on and ask your retirement questions. I mean, we are talking about annuities today, but if there's other questions you have, we'd be happy to answer those. But Dave, before we get into it, tell me just a little bit about what this webinar was about.
Yeah, so it's really trying to help people better understand why annuities of today can be such a critical part of your retirement plan. In fact, Tom went through a number of research studies that were done on annuities, a number of doctors that have done research projects, doctors or economists that have gone through and studied these topics and shared that information to help people better understand why annuities can be and should be a critical part of your retirement. If you really want to get to a more safe and secure retirement, all you got to do is take those bonds out of your portfolio, replace them with annuities. You can get yourself in a much more safe and secure position.
All right, Dave, if you're ready, let's go ahead and get Susan's question up on the screen here. Susan's the first one I wanted to bring up. And she said, if I'm closer to retirement, do you still recommend an annuity?
Absolutely, Susan, because these don't work like some of the other products that we may talk about when we talk about retirement, like maybe a long-term care policy. The older you get, the more expensive it's going to become. Even life insurance, although we have many people buying life insurance as we're entering into retirement. But when we look at annuities, for many people, they're going to wait until they get to retirement or maybe even 5 or 10 years into retirement, because there's no additional cost for doing that. And it's allowing them to be able to put the money in and and based upon age, be able to pull more out. The older you are, the more you're going to be able to pull out a higher percentage. So definitely would recommend those for you if you're going into retirement, if you are already there, and for those that maybe in their 40s or 50s. Now, when we look at people in their 30s, may work for some people depending on risk tolerance that they're facing and opportunities they have for growth. But the older we get, the more viable these annuities are going to be in our portfolios.
So Dave, like other products, I mean, we look at long-term care, a lot of people ask us about when to purchase that. It seems a little different with annuities. It's later in life that you can get a better opportunity to get the right product.
Yeah, it's one of the things that many people don't realize. In fact, Tom shared a story, and I think it may have been in the webinar. If not, it's in other webinars that he teaches. But it shares a story of a 90-year-old man that had about like $14,000 left, didn't know what to do with it. You end up spending it down. Well, he would have been in a position where he could have gotten a pretty high-paying annuity at that point. I mean, once you get to that age, especially, the annuity payouts are going to be much better than the distributions you could take off of just regular earnings because of the way they're structured and the mortality credits that are used.
That's great. Well, Dave, I wanted to jump in because I have David who is joining us live, and he's asking a question on our Facebook side where he's saying, let's see if I can get it to pull up here. He said, assume you have control over how much income you make. What is the highest you can earn during the working years before you reach a cap on Social Security payout during your retirement years? In other words, at what salary point do you continue to pay more Social Security without receiving an incremental dollar back during retirement?
David, great question. Really where it is at is at the Social Security cap. So we have the income cap that's $142,800 for 2021. At that point, you're still going to be able to get benefits up until that point. And anything you've earned previously is going to be inflation adjusted. So really it is, because it's an insurance program, not a welfare-based program. You will be able to get benefits regardless of how much money you make, as long as it up to that cap. Now, if you're making $400,000 a year and you've exceeded that cap, you're not going to get any benefits. But once you reach that cap, now the thing you need to understand though is there's bend points in there. So once you get over, I think it's about $6,000 of your adjusted monthly income, that they calculate, you're going to only get about 15% of the amount that's paid out. So it starts at 90% of the monthly calculation the Social Security Administration uses, up to just under the first $1,000, and then from there up to about $6,000, you're going to get about 32%, and then anything above that's 15. Right now, the maximum amount you're going to get at age 70 is right around $4,000 when you run their calculations and you run the thresholds they're using from an income standpoint.
David, I hope that answers your question. If not, please submit a follow-up question, and we'll get to that throughout our show today. And Dave,
let me address that a little bit more,
Sure.
from this side as we talk about it. I mean, that answers his question. But David, when you look at it again, because of the fact, there's a couple of things you want to look at. The fact that it's 35 highest years. If you can control your income and you've already got 35 decent years of earnings, you may find that you want to stop paying into Social Security as early as maybe 50, 55, 60. I mean, that's an option. The other one, again, remember, because of the way Amy's calculated and your monthly Social Security benefits are calculated, you may get a very small amount for each additional year, or if you bump up to 148,000 because you're only getting 15% of that, or 142,800, that there's some calculations that can be done that you may be better off taking some of that money and putting it into investment accounts rather than Social Security if you start getting into those higher income brackets. So just be aware there's planning that can be done, but that's, hopefully that helps as well when you're looking at strategies you can implement in your own life as it relates to Social Security.
Great advice. That's awesome, Dave. Let me jump over to our next one from Anthony. He's asking, besides age, what other factors affect the cost of an annuity?
Really, there aren't any, excluding, I guess, companies. I mean, if you're going to pick different companies or different types of annuities, most annuities now are spread products, so there's no charges being charged back to you. There's not going to be any fees related with these products. Now, if you get a variable policy, you may have some fees that you would have to pay, but it really comes back to what you're picking. Age is really the only issue you've got to worry about on your side.
And I do want to remind you, if you are watching live, go ahead and submit your question like David did. If you have anything, even if it's on Medicare, Social Security, long-term care, reverse mortgage, Dave's here to answer your question and talk it out with you. I mean, not everything he'll be able to work out with you. Some of those do require a no-fee consultation. So if you like to sit and talk to Dave and have that no fee, you can go to theprosperityguy.com and click on the strategic session tab. And you can schedule that time with Dave. But for everyone else, if you have that question, go ahead and get that submitted. And we'll do that for the duration of the show. We've got about 20 more minutes in our show here. So if you have that, go ahead and submit it. And if you have something after, you can also submit that on our website. Just, Dave, I wanted to throw that in there before we get down to our next question here from Kevin. And Kevin's asking, what do you consider to be the biggest downsides or risk for this strategy?
Yeah, if you look at it, there really no downside. I mean, if you look at the way they're structured now, I guess the biggest downside would be if you took all of your money and you put 100% of it into annuities. You may have some market, some reduction in the amount that you're able to earn from market side. But if you structure it correctly, and again, you're replacing bond portion, or you're setting the right amount in these principal protected products, there's really no downside because the insurance companies themselves have a good safety net from a state insurance fund side, as well as other insurance agencies. When you look at your guaranteed income for life, the fact that you could get income no matter how long you live, if you live to age 120, you could still be getting income. And the fact they're going to outperform bonds, all of those things put us in a situation where they become very effective tools for your retirement.
Dave, many people have had negative things to say about annuities for years, but they're changing their tune now. And I wanted to ask why.
A couple of things. Annuity companies, the insurance companies, realized they had it wrong, meaning they were charging people substantial amounts of money, giving them very little return for the products. And they realized as a result, they were getting a bad name, and rightfully so. They should have. So they changed. The other issue we even still have to this day is, unfortunately, many advisors don't understand the way annuities work. And so they sell the wrong product. They get people in maybe a variable annuity when they're trying to eliminate market risk. Well, what they did is just put them right back into the market instead of putting them into a fixed annuity. So both of those things fortunately happen. Again, the insurance companies in general fix the first. Problem is we still have a lot of people in the industry that are new to the industry that just have no idea really how these products work. And as a result, they sell the wrong product. And when that happens, it's just like doing yard work or anything else. You get the wrong tool when you're doing work, it's going to turn out to be a disaster, take a lot longer to get something done than you would otherwise expect.
Well, I'm glad you answered that for me. And I want to get over to Estelle. She's asking, can you discuss what specific annuity you recommend purchasing in the current low interest rate environment?
Yeah, there are two main ones that we'd recommend. And again, some may decide to go with a variable. That's not one that I would generally recommend because of the fact that we can usually get better performance in the stock market. For most of those annuities, you don't have the downside risk taken away, so you're still subject to a large market loss. Two, I would recommend, and the one primarily is the fixed indexed annuity that's going to allow you to have a floor in your investment, meaning if the market drops 30%, you keep whatever money has been built up inside of there. Now, if the market goes up, you're not going to get as much of an upside, but you're going to outpace inflation and the right products in the fixed environment. Other one would be a single premium immediate annuity. For some people, again, we talk about those that are getting older, they may want to just put a lump sum of money into the product and then start taking payments out immediately versus delaying like you would with a fixed indexed annuity.
Dave, when you were working with Tom, I mean, again, this is your second webinar series that you've done with Tom. What's advice have you taken from him as he's really dove into the annuity products themselves?
Yeah, the biggest advice that I take is that the world's changed. That people that have all these bad feelings towards annuities, the people that don't understand the way they work, it's because they've not looked at them recently, or again, they've had the wrong advisor that's not explained it properly so they could get the right product in the retirement. Because when we look at any plan, and Tom talks about it, he says, bring me any plan, take any financial advisor that's not going to include annuity in there, that's going to build a diversified portfolio with stocks and bonds, bring it to me. I will always outperform it. And you will, because those bonds are taken out of the portfolio, annuities are put in that are going to perform better in a safer environment. Now you've got a better looking retirement plan.
And Dave, you did talk about two products or two annuities that you've discussed there, and that Fred's asking, do the annuity, if I can talk today, do the annuities you suggest have any surrender penalties?
Most of them do have some type of penalty, and some of them could be a long period of time. But I'll tell you this, Fred, if you're getting into an annuity with the intent you're going to get back out of it, don't get into it. It's like life insurance or a marriage. I mean, if you're going to go get married tomorrow with the intent in a year from now, you're probably going to get divorced, and all the money that you spent for the marriage and all the commingling of assets and everything else, you're just going to unwind it. Really doesn't make sense for you to put the wedding together and to go through the process. Same with annuities, same with life insurance. They're designed to keep you in there for the long term. You're doing it because you want a guaranteed stream of income throughout the rest of your life. Now, we do realize there may be situations where facts and circumstances change. Maybe you have to get that money back out, and some people may end up having to pay some penalties there or some surrender charges. But the other thing is most of these are designed where you can pull up 10% per year after that first year without penalty. So if it's just a minor crisis where you're just needing access to funds, you would be able to pull it out. But if you're really looking at all these on the short term, I think, CR, that's one of the issues we have with a lot of retirees. They look at these things on a short-term basis. They let their emotions get involved. And as a result, they never really go anywhere because they just keep making bad decisions.
And I think that's what we've talked about several times in retirement is a lot of it is driven on emotions versus, hey, put your money in the right places and let it sit there for a while. I mean, you talk about the 3-bucket system, and people keep shuffling their money so much because they're not seeing that return on their investment, much like an annuity. Like you said, they're taking these knee-jerk reactions and pulling money because they just not seeing something right away.
Yeah, and you may have situations where you're going to have to roll out of products. Again, it's more about educating yourself and making sure you're getting into the right environment. That's the problem that I see, and we see it all the time. Happened again yesterday. Someone came and explained how someone was trying to sell them what we would call life insurance retirement plan. I'm sure they got the concepts from either ourselves or David McKnight, but they weren't explaining it well. So these people were just saying, look, this makes no sense to me. And they were using the wrong product too, as part of the process, probably because that's all they could sell, that they couldn't sell some of the products we do. So they were just trying to make the money they needed, but it creates issues. We need to make sure that we're getting ourselves educated, that we're going through planning. And that's one of the best things we can offer to anyone is our knowledge and the experience we have. And that's the great thing even about Tom. Is he educates all across the country on how these products work. He's not linked into any one product. He's not linked into any one company. He's there to help people better understand the underlying process so that people can then educate themselves on the products and make the right decisions for their retirement.
And if you're watching live, I'd love to know where you are in retirement. So give me a 1 in the comments if you are so not even close, or give me a 10 if you're already at the door. Or into retirement, or you're already, hey, my everything I have is set. So if you're watching live, I'd love to hear your comment on that. So just give me a number and let me know where you're at. Dave, I think a lot of times we talk about annuities like you're talking about in education. We only talk about the good. I mean, there's some bad in there, but a lot of times we just don't answer the questions that people have. And so there's a lot of people that say, Dave, I really just need to understand what the life insurance retirement plan or long-term care or annuities. And I feel like a lot of times people are shuffling those questions around and not answering them because they don't want to sell that product, or they don't have the opportunity to sell that. So they just kind of shove it aside and then just say, hey, if you do take it, it's at your own risk. And they really don't educate you. And that's what you're here to do, is to help educate.
Sarah, one of the interesting things I find when people approach annuities, and again, I realize they've changed drastically over the last 5 to 10 years, but if I go out and I ask someone, do you like your Social Security? Every one of them is going to tell me yes. In fact, it's the most popular program the government has is Social Security. What's Social Security? A guaranteed stream of lifetime income that you can't outlive. And then we go ask them about annuities. What do you think about annuities? Oh, I hate annuities. I don't want anything to do with annuities. Worst thing I could have in my retirement. Well, wait. The annuity is the exact same thing as your Social Security. It's a guaranteed payment for life. And if done correctly with the right companies, it can be a guaranteed inflation adjusted payment for life. So it really is about educating people, helping them understand. And again, we're not saying to take all of your money by any stretch and put it into annuity. That's the last thing we would want you to do. But we are telling you that you should have annuities if you really want to take risk off the table. And if you really want to help yourself, because Social Security is not enough to cover it. So you've got to find some other way to get those inflation adjusted guaranteed lifetime income, and only about 13% of you have pensions. So where else are you going to find it? You're not going to find your 401k. You're not going to find it in your IRA. So you're going to have to do something to take care of that.
And Dave, I want to bring up Scott's question because as we're talking, I like to make sure we ask you questions that are not always the easiest, but something that kind of gets people moving a little bit. And Scott's saying, but doesn't inflation erode the buying power of my guaranteed income payments?
For many annuities, yes. Now, you can structure those to where you have inflation adjusted. As the market goes up, you can get additional income coming off of those each month. But yes, this is something that's going to happen, though, with most everything you've got. Social Security is the only income most people have that's inflation adjusted. And you're going to have to be able to solve this issue. And ways you can do it is to buy staggered annuities, to where as you one gets started, as inflation goes up, another one kicks in with some additional income, so that as you age, you're able to handle those inflation periods.
Dave, now let's also talk about those who are uninsurable, who are trying to get annuities. I want to bring up Catherine's questions before we get into maybe some of your own advice. But Catherine's asking, what about people that are uninsurable due to medical conditions, cancer, early dementia, etc.?
Catherine, be aware that annuity is completely different than life insurance. You do not have to qualify from a medical standpoint for an annuity. They're willing to pay that. Again, if you've got all these issues, they're the winner in theory if you're going to die younger. Now, that can be taken into consideration when you're putting them together and your life expectancy and how that may work out, and whether you annuitize it or you just leave death benefit for your family, as some of them are structured. But insurability is not an issue when we're talking about annuities. The biggest issue we have is suitability, and it's a process that all insurance companies require. Part of it, again, going back to periods of time when salesmen and insurance companies didn't do the right thing. They oversold these products. So now there is a requirement of suitability to come in and say, okay, if someone's trying to sell you one of these products, is it suitable for your financial situation? Do you have other assets, or do you really need these guaranteed income streams? All of that's looked at, not your medical condition. So nothing you have to worry about there if you do have issues, excluding the fact that, again, if you're going to do like a single premium immediate annuity and you're expecting to die next year, may not be the best investment strategy for you based upon your life expectancy.
And again, I want to remind everyone who's watching live to go ahead and submit your retirement questions. I mean, again, as we're talking about different things here, we can get into Medicare, Social Security. Obviously, we're talking about annuities. Dave had a great webinar with Tom Hagna, and it was about annuities, and that's what we're talking about today. But feel free to submit your question, even if it doesn't get in the same ballpark, because really, Dave, we're just talking about retirement in general. And like you brought up, it's about education. So we're here to educate you on making sure you're making the right decision for your future, but not only for you and your family, your spouse. And Dave, what's important is people are looking into this to say, okay, if I'm at, let's say, a 5 or an 8 in retirement right now, and I'm looking pretty good, what advice do you still have for me?
Yeah, the biggest advice I tell people that are in this situation is to look at what could get them higher, and then get with someone like ourselves that can help get you there, that can help you understand the risk, that can help you get products in place to solve the issue. One of the things I wanted to bring up, we talked about pension plans a minute ago. And we look at, again, 13% of America is all that has pension plans. But see, most of those pension plans are underfunded. We met with someone the other day. They were a police officer. They retired in their late 40s, and they're getting $85,000 a year, and they're trying to get inflation adjusted. It used to be they're trying to get it back for the rest of their lives. I mean, that could be 50, 60 years. That type of stuff is not going to last. There's no way that the governments can continue to pay those type of payouts. So you've got to look at that as well. If your retirement's based upon a pension plan, you better be looking to see how funded it is, or look at other options to get the money out if you can, because we're going to see a lot of people when somewhere around 2030 is when I see it starting to have some major issues. We've got Medicare issues at that time. The debt's expected to be about 60 trillion. We've got Social Security starting to collapse. At that period of time, the government's going to have to ship money so bad to get into some of these government programs. I think you're going to see a lot of these state pension plans really struggle at that time to be able to keep paying out to those people who were promised benefits when they retired.
And Dave, that brings me to my question from Catherine, because again, as we talk about how these pension plans, that things obviously change, we talk about how everything can even change Social Security. And you're talking about how these things can work with us. But Dave, Catherine's asking, what about people that are uninsured? Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one here. Let me get to the right one. Beverly's asking, what if the insurance company goes bankrupt? How do you protect yourself from that?
Yeah, it's easier than you think. This is one of the biggest questions we get asked. People get concerned, and rightfully so. They should get concerned when they're looking at investing with a given company. A number of things to remember. Number one, every state has an insurance protection fund that money's getting paid into. So if a company goes under, that insurance fund's going to step in. But even more importantly, they have each other. What any insurance company, what they don't want is an article on the front page of the local newspaper saying Susie ended up passing away and Jim got left with absolutely no benefits from their insurance because the company went bankrupt. So they oftentimes will step in. The other thing you need to understand is the government will not allow insurance companies to leverage themselves like they do banks and other financial institutions. So when we look back at even 2008, you had a ton of banks go out of business because of the leverage. What happened with insurance companies? We didn't see any of them go out of business. And if they were, they ended up being bought up by some other insurance company. So if you look at the security of it, yes, we have FDIC insurance, and yes, it's backed by the government. But when I look at that insurance, if there were a catastrophe to happen, I'm not sure you wouldn't be much better off having that money in a insurance company with the way they're structured and the leverage that's allowed based upon the way the government runs the rules.
Dave, you are a retirement risk advisor. And so what you're doing is you're basically going through and helping everyone tackle risk in retirement. And that, as you're talking about pensions, you're talking about maybe going bankrupt in some of these areas. Tell me, what's the number one risk that you think people are facing in retirement right now?
Number one risk is longevity risk, and that's just because it's a risk multiplier. Now, when you look at it on the surface, you're saying, wait, because I live longer, that's my number one risk. Yeah, because it multiplies everything else because you've got more time for something to happen. And when you look at it, especially from long-term care, I will tell you is the biggest financial risk facing people because the longer you live, bigger chance you have having long-term care event. That can be $300,000, $400,000, maybe even $500,000 to get through if you're going to pay for it yourself, or if you've got insurance, it's going to cost them that to be able to pay for it. But longevity is the biggest problem because it increases the risk of a long-term care event. It increases tax rate risk. You've got a longer period of time for taxes to go up, increases inflation risk because the longer you live, the bigger problem it becomes, and sequence of return. It creates more opportunities for the market to drop. You have to pull out money and it becomes a big problem.
And Dave, as a retirement risk advisor, how do you help eliminate the risk that you're talking about?
It's really putting plans together that address these risks. So if we do our planning, what we're going to do is take where you're at and map it out for the next 30 or 40 years and see what happens. And then we take that plan and we stress test it. We start saying, hey, what happens if taxes go up? What happens if we had a long-term care event? What happens if you didn't claim your Social Security at the same time? And then we show what that looks like. And obviously for most people and almost all people, it looks way worse than what their other plan looked like. And then what we do is we stress test that and we start putting strategies in place that we know of that will help eliminate those risks. Now, we can't always eliminate them all. Sometimes we're just going to reduce those. But what we find is that we can make those retirements more secure. We can make them better. I mean, it's really just like our lives now. You know, if you buy no insurance now and you just go about your lives, you drive a car, you live in your house, you do all of these things, well, there's a chance at some point there's going to be a major financial disaster that's going to really hurt you financially. Maybe the house burns down, maybe you're in an accident, someone gets hurt, you've got to pay out of pocket for that because you have no insurance. Well, it's really that way in retirement. If we've not prepared for these risks, you've got a very high chance that one of the issues we talk about, one of the risks we discuss is going to completely derail that retirement. If it does, unfortunately, the remaining years you have or a spouse has are going to look much different than what they did leading up to that point.
And Dave, that's why it's important that they sit down and have that no-fee consultation with you. So again, if you want to do that, go to theprosperityguy.com. You can click on the strategic session tab and fill out a form. It's very, very short form. And you can schedule your appointment right then with Dave and to get through that. So Dave, I think it's important as we wrap up here, as we're talking about annuities. I mean, again, we've talked about so many different topics from your show with Tom Hagna, the Retirement Alpha. And any parting words that we can give anyone, again, that's maybe on the fence or watching saying, I really like this, but I just don't know if I'm ready for it.
I would invite you to take advantage of the no-fee consultation. Again, when you look at the amount of education we can provide now, we do it in a group environment all the time. We do it through our webinars, through our podcasts, and you're going to get all kinds of information. But when you can sit down and start asking your individual questions, having them answered in maybe a 5, 10, or 30-minute discussion, whatever the case may be, we start seeing magic happen in people's lives. We start seeing things start to make more sense. We start seeing people desire to make change that can really get them to a point that they can be in a much better position going forward.
And again, if you want to catch any more of Dave's webinars, you can go over to theprosperityguy.com and click on the events tab, and you'll be able to find more webinars. Again, you can always catch Dave every week on the Prosperity Gap podcast. And again, at 11 a.m. Central, you can always catch this show on Facebook or YouTube. And Dave, thank you so much for being part of that. I would tell you, go ahead.
You bet. Real quick, I want to tell you one more thing I'm not even sure you're aware of yet. So we have launched the next webinar. It may not be up on our platform yet, and it may not be up to where you can access, but we'll be in the next few days. But Tom and I have launched the Don't Worry, Retire Happy. This is another book written by Tom. He's doing a webinar on this at the end of the month. We've got that scheduled already and are looking forward to just continuing to provide additional information regarding your retirement. So look out for that as well if you're looking for webinars to help you better understand where you should be as you approach these golden years.
And so, again, you can find all that at the prosperityguy.com, and you can get that. And, Dave, it looks like I'm going to have to go back to the beach. It seems like the sun's finally coming up. It's harder to see, but you're getting a better idea as the sun's starting to come out, and I might have to go back down and take some more advantage of that water out there.
Yeah, grab your surfboard, grab your board shorts, and get out there and have fun today.
And for everyone else, I guess I would say aloha, because that's the thing they say around here. But thank you so much for being part of the show. And again, if you didn't get your question answered, you can always submit that at theprosperityguy.com under the Contact Us tab, or you can shoot a message through the PM there. And Dave, thank you so much for being part of the show today.
You bet. Glad to be here. Look forward to this every week. And I guess next week you'll be back in Utah. Who knows where I'll be? It seems like every week we end up in different location.
Exactly. And David just giving a quick shout out at the end saying, Dave, thanks for all the content. And David, thank you for being here live. And for the rest of you, thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure to have all of you with us, and we'll see you guys again next week.
See you guys. Great to have you.